Josh Hasten here, Israel Uncensored, on the Land of Israel Network at thelandofisrael.com. It is Sunday, the 10th of March, 2019, the 3rd of Adar, Bet 5779. You are listening to the show on Monday or after Monday, on March the 11th. I'm recording here a day earlier in Jerusalem. My guest on the program in just a few minutes, the Middle East Forum's Israel Director, Danny Seaman. He has been on the show before. Danny never holds back, and I'm sure he's not going to do so on today's show as well. Thanks so much for joining us. You can get in touch with me always via email, josh@thelandofisrael.com, on Facebook. Check out my new page, Josh Hasten, Israel Advocacy and Journalism. On Twitter, it is at Josh Hasten. Starting the show today, unfortunately, with horrible news. The Associated Press reports that Ethiopian Airlines flight number 302 from Addis Ababa to Nigeria crashed with 149 passengers and 8 crew members on board, and all of them were killed, including 2 Israelis. So extremely sad to hear about the crash of the Ethiopian Airlines flight here on Sunday morning. Just tragic, very, very sad. The flight, the airline was a Boeing 737, crashing shortly after takeoff Sunday morning from Addis Ababa at 8:38 a.m. Again, killing all 149 passengers and 8 crew aboard, including 2 Israelis. The identity of the Israelis has not been released at this time, but apparently there were people from many, many countries on that flight. Terrible news to start the week there. Here in Israel, over the weekend, Israeli jets strike Hamas targets after mortars were launched from Gaza, as reported by Times of Israel. The Israel Defense Forces said fighter jets and aircraft hit several targets, including a military compound in the north of the Strip and 2 naval vessels belonging to the Hamas terror group. This on Saturday night. The strikes in response to rocket fire. So here we are in the situation again where rockets are being fired into Israel. Israel responds, and then there is more rocket fire. And of course, the situation continues on the border as these armed terrorists tried to infiltrate, as they have been almost for a year now, every Friday on the Israel-Gaza border. On Saturday, sappers were called after a cluster of balloons suspected of carrying an explosive device, perhaps an anti-tank warhead, landed in Israeli territory. That's where we're headed, folks. Anti-tank warheads attached to balloons floating into Israel with the goal to murder. Yet somehow the UN and everyone else refers to this as peaceful protests and blames Israel, takes Israel to task for doing what is necessary, namely shooting these monsters as they're trying to infiltrate into Israel, trying to murder Israelis with explosive devices. That is their goal, to murder the first Israeli they see as they try to cross into the border. Yet the world paints them out to be peaceful protesters again and condemns Israel. Nothing new under the sun. That's what's going on. The Prime Minister of the State of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, warned Hamas, is saying that Israel will not hesitate to launch a large-scale operation in Gaza, as these daily exchanges with the terrorist groups are threatening a wider escalation. Speaking ahead of the weekly cabinet meeting, Netanyahu noted that while rogue factions were behind the recent Gaza, what he called provocations, it did not exempt Hamas from responsibility. This is the Prime Minister of the State of Israel again, but we've heard many, many times before that if Hamas continues, that Israel will respond forcefully, or using double the force or triple the force or more force than ever used before. Let's see. I mean, we've heard this before, and of course Israel launching 3 different operations into Gaza, but Hamas remains standing. Those are the facts of trying to infiltrate into Israel on a weekly and if not daily basis. A poll was released on Saturday night here, reported by the Jewish press. It was actually a Haaretz poll, which they are quoting here, predicting that the blue and white party of Benny Gantz and Yair Lapid they are losing votes according to the latest numbers. In other words, the Likud, the current party in power, Prime Minister Netanyahu's party, is gaining. Right now, the numbers show, as of March the 9th, if elections were held today, and again, these are just polls, Gantz's party would have 31 seats, Likud would have 28. At the same time, Moshe Feiglin's Zehut party, according to this poll, would make it into the Knesset with the minimum of 4 seats. A long way to go, folks. There's still a month left till the elections, and polls, you never know. I mean, the U.S., the last presidential election of the U.S. proves that the polls are not always right. The same thing happened the last time we went to elections here, where Yitzhak Herzog was predicted to be the next prime minister of Israel, or his party, the Labor Party, or whatever it was called. At the time, I mean, they're changing party names all the time. National Union, was it? They were projected to win the election, and then the Likud came out ahead. So we'll see how that goes. But talking about the United States, we mentioned the last election, President Trump. Jason Greenblatt, special U.S. envoy to the Middle East, spoke at the UN Security Council the other day, asking what country in the world would tolerate a reward system that compensates terrorists for their crimes, referring, of course, to the Palestinian Authority and the fact that the PA continues to pay terrorists who carry out attacks, terrorists who are in Israeli jails, and their families. Greenblatt defending Israel's decision to deduct from the taxes it transfers every month to the PA the same amount of money the PA pays to terrorists and their families. Greenblatt defended Israel at a Security Council closed-door debate initiated by Kuwait and Indonesia on Israel's decision. I'm sure it's obvious where the alliances there of Kuwait and Indonesia were in that session there. Last month, Israel's Security Cabinet decided to deduct more than $500 million shekels it collects in tariffs it transfers to the PA, equal to the amount of money the PA paid terrorists in 2018. I don't understand why we ever turn over that money in lieu of the fact that the money for years has been used to pay terrorists. I know that there's something called the Oslo Accords, in which we agreed to transfer over these funds, collect the taxes, and transfer over the money. But as a result of years and years and years of terror, I think a long time ago, it would have made sense to go ahead and stop. We call on other countries not to transfer funds to the Palestinian Authority or finance anti-Israel BDS NGOs. If we are going to call out other countries and demand that they stop funding the Israel haters, demand that they stop funding the PA's Pay for Slay program, the Taylor Force Act, and other legislation which is trying to keep the money out of the hands of the terrorists financed by the PA, then it all starts at home. I've said it many, many times before. It all starts at home. Israel should have done this long ago. I'm glad that they're doing it now, at least partially, holding back some of the funding, but hopefully this will continue for a long time. And it's good to see the U.S. Special Envoy Jason Greenblatt defending Israel at the always hostile UN Security Council. Of course, ultimately we'll have to see, as we still await President Donald Trump's deal of the century, scheduled to be published perhaps after Israeli elections on April the 9th. We'll see where that goes. That's all the news for now. We're going to take a break and come back with Middle East Forums. The Middle East Forums Israel director, our good friend Danny Seaman, who never holds back when discussing the issues of the day. We'll talk to him about the elections and what's going on with the Democratic Party in the U.S. My name is Josh Hasten. This is Israel Uncensored on the Land of Israel Network at thelandofisrael.com. I am recording here in Jerusalem on Sunday, the 10th of March, 2019, the 3rd of Adar, Bet. The second Adar 5779. Get in touch with me during the week. Josh at thelandofisrael.com on Facebook, my new page. Josh Hasten, Israel Advocacy and Journalism, and on Twitter at Josh Hasten. Short break, and we will be back with Danny Seaman. Don't go anywhere.
The question is, why are the Jews there in the first place? The Jewish people have been yearning to return to their ancient homeland for a long time.
The Yishai Fleischer Show, the voice of a new generation of pro-Israel activists.
And there's only two kinds of minorities in the Middle East, armed or unarmed.
Inspiring minds to think differently.
That jihadism doesn't just attack Jews. It attacks Christians, and it mostly attacks Muslims.
Inspiration, spirituality, and politics.
So first and foremost, this country is here to defend Jewish people and to live in its ancestral homeland.
Listen to the Yishai Fleischer Show every week on the Land of Israel Network at thelandofisrael.com.
And we are back. Josh Hasten here, Israel Uncensored, on the Land of Israel Network at thelandofisrael.com. It is Sunday, the 10th of March, 2019, the 3rd of Adar, Bet 5779. Thanks so much for joining us. Don't forget, you can get in touch with me during the week. Josh at thelandofisrael.com on Facebook. Check out my new page, Josh Hasten, Israel Advocacy and Journalism, on Twitter at Josh Hasten. We are here with my very good friend, Danny Seaman. He is the Middle East Forum's Israel director. He's been on the show in the past, and Danny and I go way back, as you know, from the old station, and which we don't mention by name, but the old station where he was a top producer there. Danny, welcome back to Israel Uncensored.
Hi, Josh.
Danny, I want to start with politics here. New poll released over the weekend by Haaretz, actually last night, Saturday night, indicating that support for the blue and white party of Benny Gantz, Yair Lapid, and the rest of them is dwindling slightly. The numbers right now, according to this new poll for Haaretz, show that Gantz has 31 seats, Likud is 28 seats. In other words, the gap between the two have narrowed. I believe last week it was somewhere between 35 and 36 for Gantz and 30 for Likud. So the gap there is narrowing. We still have a month to go before elections, but what do you make of these latest numbers? Latest numbers will show that Likud perhaps is catching up.
I don't know. I don't believe in polls, and I certainly don't believe in polls that Haaretz newspapers, they have a political agenda. They've always had a political agenda. They always lie about things in order to affect the public. I'll tell you one thing. If anybody calls me up, I never give them the information. I know a lot of Israelis are like me, especially those on the right wing. I do it just to be facetious and screw up their polls. But a lot of Israelis don't feel comfortable expressing, and I think this also happens in the United States, supporting the right wing or saying that they support the right wing. So the polls are not... Now, by the way, Israeli pollsters have learned to try to weed those out. But with a paper that has a political agenda, I believe that it was expected that they would go down after the hype and the excitement, and now they're starting to think about, oh my God, what are we doing? We're going to vote for these people, those on the left. Even if you say Gantz, okay, he has experience as a chief of staff, he has no political experience whatsoever. You don't go from the military, unless you're in a coup, from the military to running a country. The other thing is that people have to realize that this is what Gantz is saying is, and their party is saying, Gantz will be for 2 years, and then 2 years later we'll let Yair Lapid be prime minister. And a lot of people are saying, oh my God, are we going to really accept that? Because if Gantz has experience as running an organization, Lapid has no experience whatsoever. Yes, he's been a politician for a few years, but he was a failed politician. He is not the people you want to put the destiny of the Jewish people in that guy's hands. I won't go and be more insulting, but if you ask me privately, you'll know exactly what I say. This is not the person. So I think that the numbers are even more inclined to support the Likud. What they're doing here is making it clear. In the past, they would show in advance that they are leading, and they would lose voters. So this time they're saying, hey, you better keep up with your support because the Likud is catching up right now. And you can see by they let the Feiglin party, they say that they passed the threshold. I believe the poll says that, so that people will continue voting for Feiglin and not vote for Likud or for one of the more secure right-wing parties. I don't trust Haaretz. It begins and ends with that.
So, but are you confident, though, that once, let's say, Netanyahu is asked or tasked to form a government, are you confident, though, that we're going to get a right-wing government here in Israel? Or do you think that ultimately, based on just the numbers themselves, and again, you said you don't believe in polls, but do you think that Prime Minister Netanyahu, if in fact he does win, will have to turn to Benny Gantz in the blue and white in order to form a stable coalition? Or do you think at this point he will be able to turn to, let's say, Naftali Bennett's New Right Party, perhaps Feigelin's party if he passes the threshold, and Israel Beitenu and some of the others, Jewish Home Party? Do you think he'll go that route, or do you think ultimately he will have to form a government with Gantz, which actually would probably mean that Gantz becomes the next defense minister of the state of Israel? What's your thought on that?
There's so many things that could happen between now and the elections. I think we'll know things will be much clearer the week before, because that's what really determines what the election will be about. Last time it was the night, the day of the election, Netanyahu was able to sway a lot of votes. So it's very hard to say. I know that Netanyahu is very shrewd. The key word for him, let's go to the day after the elections. Say the Likud does have the largest number of votes. I think that if any other party has, if the polls as they are now reflect what happens on election day, the president of Israel will be under tremendous pressure by the left wing to allow Gantz to set it up first. There's a lot of things that can happen here. He may be able to create Likud members who want to get rid of Netanyahu, may say that, look, you lost the election, step aside, we'll form a coalition, we'll join the Gantz coalition. He'll have a mutiny in his own hands. That's one possibility. But I think that if all things being equal, most likely Netanyahu will get the majority, will set up, and then the issue for him is stability. And by stability, he's going to try to get as many people as possible, so now not one single member can undermine that, and he can have a cabinet for 3 to 4 years. So he's going to be looking to get the broadest as possible. That means certainly the right-wing parties and the religious parties, because each one outdoes the other. And you can have, say, a right wing has a majority of between 61 to 65, which is most likely. He will try to get Gantz in there, but Gantz is going to have a problem on his hands, because his party is not unified politically. You have people from the right wing and the left wing. It's a whole, I don't even know what the proper word is to call this, but you have from every possible angle in Israeli politics there, and many of his own people may not want to. And you may have separation. After the elections, Bibi can come and say to Gantz, I'll take the people of your party if you want to, and I'll give you Minister of Defense, but drop Lapid and let him go into the opposition. There's so many things that can happen, but I think we have to remember the keys are stability, having as many members so he's not dependent on one single who can blackmail him afterwards. That's probably what we're going to be seeing.
Well, we will know soon enough here, with elections just a few weeks away. Just want to get to one other topic, if we can, here. This whole issue about what's going on in the U.S. Congress, and I want your take as an Israeli, somebody who lives here. I mean, I actually try to stay away from this story more or less because, I'm here and I understand it. I appreciate the support of Congress, no doubt about it. And I understand there's some haters who've been elected, to put it mildly. So I've really tried to stay away from it. But that being said, I mean, it is a somewhat of a major story, I guess, especially if you live in the U.S., and a lot of listeners do live in the United States. The Jerusalem Post reports today that President Donald Trump called the Democratic Party an anti-Jewish and an anti-Israel party after the U.S. House of Representatives passed new legislation condemning all forms of hate on an interview with C-SPAN. He said Democrats have become an anti-Israel party, an anti-Jewish party, as he was headed towards Alabama, and that's too bad. And we're talking about late Thursday night, the House passed a resolution condemning, quote, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, racism, other forms of bigotry. And we're talking about freshman members in the Congressional Black Caucus accusing their leadership of unfairly targeting, I believe it's pronounced Ilhan, how do you pronounce her name? Omar, the representative from Minnesota, over her comments accusing Israel advocates of dual loyalties. She's gone on a tirade on Twitter, as most people know by now, several times. I would call it anti-Semitic. I don't care what anybody else calls it. But yet Congress of the United States cannot pass, or the Democrats cannot, let's be clear, cannot pass a resolution condemning just anti-Semitism. They throw out all these other things here, thus downplaying her comments and downplaying what we're seeing as a worldwide phenomena of anti-Semitism. Your reaction to this whole story?
Oh, there's several things. First off, how progressive of them that they condemn everything. Wow, let's get your act together. We have a real problem here. Everything else can be addressed and is addressed. But when it comes to Jews, it becomes acceptable. Hatred towards Jews becomes acceptable. And unfortunately, very much like in Germany before World War II, American Jews are playing into this and collaborating with it by remaining silent. They should be making it very clear to the Democratic Party and to every one of those leaders there that you're going to lose our vote. That is where their power lies. Not with the Democratic Party, but by being Jewish. And they don't get that, because they've been running scared for a long time. Now, I'm sitting here in Israel, and you're right. I don't care about it. That's their problem. We're here in Israel. I can laugh about this. People making these kind of ridiculous anti-Semitic buffoonery. And, you idiots, you want to deal with it? Go ahead. We here in Israel, that's fine. We have our own country. We have our ability of defending ourselves. Our kids are not helpless. Our kids are not going to those schools there and having to deal with the anti-Semitism that you're dealing with, and it's your problem. Get it into your skulls already. You're the fault for this because you've been appeasing it instead of speaking out closely. Because what happens now? She knows. She doesn't care. That member of Congress knows that's what's going to get her elected. Now, she becomes the extreme, and it makes all other terms of anti-Semitism and hatred towards Israel and all these other excuses that they use, which are pure and simple anti-Semitism, it makes it acceptable. And now the Democrats know that at their core, they can't speak out against this because they may lose the election. Make them understand they're going to lose it anyway. Use your Jewish power. Start using yourselves as serious and treating yourselves seriously instead of being the wash rags of the Democratic Party. Where are the Jews? You talk about your place, Hollywood and the media. Put the fear of the Jewish people in them finally. You've been able to create that power in the United States. Instead of being afraid of it, use it. Bring it to your benefit. Make the Jewish leaders, you know how to speak out against Israel. Start speaking out against the people who are trying to undermine the stability and your life in the United States. I'd love for you all to come here, but I respect the fact that you live in the United States. Your kids are endangered now because of you behaving like wussies. Start manning up. Start being Jewish and proud of it.
Now tell us what you really think, Danny. No, I'm just kidding. That's why we have him on the show. Danny Seaman does not hold back, no filter, uncensored, and that's why the show's called Israel Uncensored. And that's why it's always great to have Danny Seaman on the program, Middle East Forum's Israel Director. We are, unfortunately, out of time for today, but I want to thank our guest, Danny Seaman, Middle East Forum's Israel Director, for appearing on the show. It's great to have you on. Thanks so much for being here, Danny.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And that's going to do it for today, ladies and gentlemen. I am Josh Hasten. This is Israel Uncensored. And as you heard from Danny, this is truly uncensored. For Sunday, March the 10th, 2019, you'll be hearing the show for the first time Monday, March 11th. Today is also the third Adar, Bet 5779. Getting ready for the holiday of Purim here in beautiful Jerusalem, where we're broadcasting from today. If you have any questions or would like to give feedback on the program, it's always appreciated. Josh at thelandofisrael.com. On Facebook, check out my new page, Josh Hasten, Israel Advocacy and Journalism. On Twitter, at Josh Hasten. And on Instagram, as I've told you last week, I just started with this Instagram. I'm still learning it. I don't know really what I'm doing. If you have Instagram tips, send them to me, Josh at thelandofisrael.com. I'm happy to hear and get some free advice on how to best utilize Instagram for Israel, pro-Israel advocacy. That's all the time we have for today. Thanks to Benjamin Bresky, engineer extraordinaire. Without him, there's no sound. Tabitha Epstein for all the work she does. And, of course, catch all of the shows here on the Land of Israel Network. Signing out for this week. Most importantly, between now and when we speak again, please God, next week, next Monday, everyone out there in the wonderful world of ours, be safe. Shalom, shalom from Jerusalem, Israel, the eternal capital of the Jewish people.
Who are we as a people? Who are we as a nation? What does it mean to be a Jew in the land of Israel, as a Jew in Judea? What is our message to the world? We're finally back in our land, and we get to ask these questions.
Be'ezrat Hashem, we're going to make Judea and Samaria an issue for the entire world, to know that the Jews have a place in the world.
Israel Inspired with Ari Abramowitz and Jeremy Gimpel on the Land of Israel Network at thelandofisrael.com.